Good afternoon and welcome to the monthly webinar of the Western Center for Metropolitan Extension and Research for April. My name is Martha Aitken. I'm a Senior Associate for Metropolitan Extension with Washington State University, and I am pleased to be your host for this broadcast. The Western Center was established by the Western Extension Directors Association with funding from the extension programs of the University of Alaska Fairbanks, University of California, Colorado State University, University of Idaho, Oregon State University, and Washington State University, who hosts the center. Before we get started, if you haven't used GoToWebinar before, I'd like to go over a few useful features. The webinar will work best on your computer if you close other applications while you participate. On the menu bar, the blue screen button lets you toggle between a full screen and a partial screen. If you want to view the webinar at full screen, you will want to toggle back to enter a question in the questions pod. The orange arrow opens and hides your control panel. You may enter your questions into the question pod at any time. However, we will wait until the end of the program to ask questions of our presenter. Our webinar today is being recorded for later viewing, including all the questions you post in the questions pod. The Western Center was established to increase the internal capacity of extension programs to address metropolitan issues and to elevate the stature and value of cooperative extension to external metropolitan audiences. The overarching goal of the Western Center is to help extension better align programs with the needs, issues, and interests of their metropolitan constituency. The center believes that to be successful, extension professionals need essential skills to thrive in today's diverse and complex metropolitan communities, such as the ability to work across generations and the skills to work within multi-stakeholder collaborations. To reach this goal, the center provides professional development opportunities through staff exchanges, webinars, and workshops. The center has a two-pronged research agenda to conduct research on effective metropolitan organizational and staffing models and best practices in programming, delivery, and evaluation, and to explore emerging metropolitan issues so that land-grant universities can help communities make informed decisions and develop sound and equitable policies. And now it gives me great pleasure to introduce today's presentation, National Urban Extension Leaders, NUEL 101 with Patrick Proden and Marie Rumenap. Patrick Proden serves as the Oregon State University Outreach and Engagement Regional Administrator for the Metro region in Portland, Oregon. Prior to this position, Patrick served as the Country Director for the U.S. Peace Corps in Tanzania. He also served as the Adult Education and Workforce Development Director for Ilisavik College in Barrow, Alaska, adjacent to the Arctic Ocean. There, he worked in partnership with petroleum engineering industries on workforce and career readiness opportunities for Native Alaskan students. Patrick has served as Director of International Programs, Director of Operations, and Senior Program Officer with several U.S. government agencies, where he provided vision and leadership for high-volume, high-impact community development programs, both domestically and internationally. He also served as a Peace Corps volunteer in Niger, West Africa, working on agroforestry and environmental projects. Patrick is on the Western Center Advisory Board and is Vice Chair of the NUEL Executive Committee. He's also involved with a national civic engagement project on rural development and a soon-to-be-launched urban-focused community development project, both with the Kettering Foundation. Patrick graduated from the University of Wisconsin with a BS in anthropology, and he earned a master's in education from Towson University in Baltimore, Maryland. Marie Rumenap has worked for Michigan State University Extension for 29 years in both educational and administrative positions. She's currently assigned to the MSU Extension Director's Office, working on special assignments as part of the organizational development team. Previously, Marie was the MSU District Coordinator for Wayne, Oakland, and Macomb counties, which encompasses the greater Detroit metropolitan area. In this role, she provided administrative leadership for 11 extension offices. Prior to that, Marie was Regional Director for Southeast Michigan, a 13-county area which is home to approximately 60% of Michigan's residents, and where she provided administrative leadership to 325 extension professionals. Marie received a bachelor's degree in agriculture and natural resource communications and a master's in community services, both from Michigan State University. In addition to her current appointment, Marie is working on her PhD at Michigan State in urban and regional planning. Marie and Patrick, it's great to have you with us today. Welcome to the webinar.
Thank you, Martha. Thank you. And welcome to everyone that is able to join us this afternoon. My name is Patrick Proden. Marie and I are delighted to engage with you on this webinar and the topic of the National Urban Extension Leaders 101. So really want to give a shout out to folks. And I know our friends in Alaska, it's still morning, but glad everyone is with us. The purpose of our presentation today is really to outline the need, interest, and opportunity for extension to expand and enhance efforts to address the needs and issues of urban and metropolitan residents and communities. It's also to introduce the audience to the National Urban Extension Leaders, or what we are calling NUEL as that acronym. And two, it is to share with you how to become more involved and also share with you the importance of building the urban network within NUEL. So our session agenda today is really to look at a couple different things. We're going to hit on extension's grand challenges of both the next century and also our current. We're going to discuss several highlights attached to an urban vision and urban characteristics. We're going to speak to the structure of the National Urban Extension Leader structure, and we're also going to share how you can get involved and make a difference in urban and within the Cooperative Extension System. So many of you may know Dr. Jimmy Henning, who is the past ECOP, the Extension Committee on Organization and Planning chair, and he's also the director of the University of Kentucky's Cooperative Extension Service, who spoke in a session during the 2015 National Extension Conference in Atlanta on the grand challenges as he saw them for extension in the next century and in the now. So things that were included in that conversation with Dr. Henning really hit on agriculture, food systems, food safety, public health issues such as diabetes, childhood obesity, community vitality and resiliency, both in our natural resource world, and also leveraging the resources and the oomph, if you will, of the land-grant university within the system, harnessing the research, resources, and reach of community engagement as we work throughout the nation in our cooperative extension system. And all of these pieces are really indicative of what an urban environment kind of represents. And very importantly, in that listing on the slide, you see that serving urban clientele is incredibly important to our work of today and our work also of tomorrow, and where extension can impact and work with these communities. You could sort of ask the question, why is it imperative for extension to expand its efforts in urban and metropolitan areas? And this map really demonstrates some interesting sort of visuals. But did you know that since the creation of the land-grant universities in 1862, 19.8% of the people lived in urban areas back in that era? And many of the current issues of that time were related, of course, to agriculture. And we've all heard stories of the former agriculture or 4-H agent, now faculty or extension educator, depending on the term that you use in your respective states, delivering, disseminating information vis-a-vis traditional methodologies as the agents, the faculty, worked with farmers, youth, and community as America grew and developed, and of course became what it is today. Extension played a big part in its development, of course, and it's important to keep close to the ties of the land and the history and the relationship to such, because it's really, frankly, what formed the first 100 years of extension. However, over time, as the visuals represents, there's been a shift. Today, 80.7% of the people live in urban areas in the country and within our society. Not all, of course, are related to rural, and you can sort of see the map as you move from the Midwest to the East Coast compared to, or the East Coast compared to the West Coast. But there's a lot of urbanization issues that are out there. So part of Extension's role in the second 100 years can be to assist with the challenges of urban and to bring urban and rural together in partnership. Okay, I'm going to share a little bit of a vision that when Dr. Henning spoke at the Urban Extension Conference in Atlanta in 2015, he said that Extension needed to develop or have value in the urban market by adapting the rural model that Extension uses. I may take it a step further, speaking from experience. It is very difficult, truly hard, to retrofit traditional extension programs and models into urban environments for a variety of reasons. You have different needs, the demographics are different, the local context is extremely complicated. It is not a cookie-cutter approach that often works when you try to retrofit traditional extension program into urban environments. So having adaptive programming that meets the needs of the urban audience, which are different demographic and a different environment altogether than rural audience, is key to our success in the future. As is expanding our volunteer development and training of trainer models, where faculty attention is not solely focused on being subject matter experts, but that of program, project managers, with volunteers and staff alike, some of whom may be short-term, episodic, or committed to one chunk or body of work. And it's sort of that in and out, idea that, in urban environments, folks like to get involved in short-term work, partly due to their commitments, their schedule, and what they happen to be interested in. Importantly, expanding partnerships and understanding what roles we can effectively play in urban environments, that too is super critical. Connecting with community colleges, the K-12 system, governments at all levels, nonprofits, startup businesses, internal departments and colleges within our land-grant universities to bring services and community and people together is primary. So you could sort of ask, what is unique about cities? And I want to point out that when you use the word cities and urban and metropolitan areas, perhaps for the sake of this conversation, we can think about using these words or phrases sort of interchangeably. But that said, as the population of America moved to metropolitan areas, so did most of the pressing national societal challenges. So you had cities and metropolitan areas, in this day that are a mixture of cultures, attitudes, and norms and beliefs. They've been woven together to create a distinctive culture for each city or metropolitan area. Urban challenges, as I may have mentioned a second ago, are enormously complex, and simply there's no real easy solutions. And yet as cities and urban areas grow, we do not want to lose sight of the importance of rural areas, that landscape, the history, which in many cases supports urban engagement. And of course it is what made and makes America a great country, that history, our tradition, our open spaces, and a way of life that goes unmatched throughout the world. First off, in a metropolitan type environment, you typically would have larger counties, or those found such as within a NACO type of structure, such as the large urban county caucus, and a number of cities that could be super large and also quite small within an urban county, combined in many cases with a metro government which has some level of decision making tied perhaps to, say, land use, transportation, etc. And so the complexities of this within kind of metro type of issues usually affect multiple entities. They're typically multi-jurisdictional, and of course they're also very politically influenced. And additionally, you have residents in these areas that often elect the bulk of the state and federal legislators that represent the entire state. And metro areas frequently have not only have multiple governmental service providers, but they also have a large number of nonprofits, for-profit organizations providing information and services that can act as partners, and of course, quite often competitors to Extension. For Extension, the complex socio-political landscape, intensity of these issues I'm outlining, and the competition for other service providers really requires an updated engagement model and strategy that allows Extension to be relevant in metropolitan areas. We're really very small fish in a big pond compared to rural, where we happen to be the big player in maybe a larger landscape type environment. And I think this speaks to, you know, kind of the idea or the model of collective impact. Sheer size and diversity of population and how Extension serves multicultural and diverse communities, of course, also dictates how Metro is incredibly unique with the various facets and fabrics of culture and society. But also, too, I think it's very, very important to ensure that the urban, the suburban, and the rural interdependencies are kind of part and parcel to some of the things that we do. Simply because urban and rural America and Americans, and us included, are connected and interdependent. Many of our folks, relatives, friends, family, and so on, still to this day live in rural areas, and we visit them and we spend time with them, and so on and so forth. And so I think a lot of kind of all our culture and some of our way of life and tradition, of course, obviously crops up through, you know, rural. Complex issues, of course, do not stop at rural county lines or a city boundary. Metropolitan and rural areas share common social issues such as poverty, hunger, housing, and homelessness, migration, population shifts. You have issues such as public safety and health. And in well-functioning cities and suburbs that are healthy and sustainable, you too need that connection and that interdependence and that link to rural communities. You know, just think about the food systems and the food sheds that are out there in the various places around the United States. The prevailing national narrative, however, continues to address rural and urban issues, oftentimes as separate investments. And a robust urban extension presence can help bridge this disconnect and assist in building stronger connectivity between the urban, the suburban, and the rural communities. And investing in cities or urban will not only help our entire system, it will assist in creating the linkages and that spirit of interdependencies between the urban, the suburbia, the rural that our country was founded on, and the growth spurts that it experienced in the 20th and now 21st centuries. So I want to talk a little bit about why the shift to urban areas. And you could ask, why is 80.7% of the population now living in kind of the defined urban communities across the country? Some of the reasons have to do with opportunities, accessibility, affordability, depending upon the city, of course, connections to resources such as education, higher ed, employment, advancement, career advancement, the interest in being mobile and connected. In some cases, with high college debt and stagnant wages, people can't afford to buy homes, and they are renting housing. This is both a rural and an urban issue, of course. But there are also many attractive attributes of urban areas that are appealing to young people, particularly the millennial generation, such as great public spaces, the walkability, diverse people, activities. There are also people who lack the ability to migrate out of urban areas, in part due to their reliance on such things as public transportation, proper health care that sometimes is only available in urban areas. So this slide really represents a few possible examples, and of course a list generated by the audience today could suggest many more. And noted, as people move into urban spaces and population density increases, there are many more social and environmental issues that crop up associated with urban areas. You have issues such as water quality, aging infrastructure, unemployment, food access, and housing. So the question can be, or one of the first questions becomes, how can the land-grant university address these issues? And hopefully your answer, at least in part, is the Cooperative Extension System can help figure some of these complex issues and community solves out a little bit in urban environments. We know for us that are internal to Extension that Cooperative Extension is a unique network that links local and campus-based extension professionals from land-grant universities, along with federal, state, and local partners to residents across the nation. And of course, our mission is to enhance the quality of life of residents throughout the country using that research, science-based education programming that brings the wealth of knowledge of the state university to local communities. So it's bringing the knowledge from campuses, land-grant university campuses, to the people. And this, of course, is a wealth of knowledge. We retain that knowledge to share with community. This is done through the integration of research, education, and outreach from land-grant universities. We deliver knowledge in science, engineering, policy, human dimension to provide unbiased science-based solutions. And of course, these are important reminders of how empowered our system is to make differences in the lives of people and community, especially at that most basic local level. Through using the statewide extension model that most of us are familiar with, it provides education that people can trust to help individuals, businesses, and communities solve problems, for them to develop the skills and build a better future. And we do that through assessments and looking at the needs of local stakeholders, looking at the best science and the best research that's out there to address the problems, developing educational outreach programs for community that meet that local need, implementing community-based solutions, and then of course evaluating impact and adapting programs, all of which is tied to the overall national cooperative extension system. So in this statewide extension model connected to our larger national cooperative extension system, which has been successful, of course, for over the last 100 years in helping address rural and agricultural issues, just for starters. By applying this extension model, not necessarily, again, retrofitted, as mentioned earlier, from that traditional standpoint, to urban problems, you can yield outstanding results, including in areas such as this slide represents or illustrates, in a variety of ways. You have opportunities to engage in sustainable and green infrastructure. You have educational opportunities and for extension to play a role in the K through 12, in the K through community college, as well as throughout the university system in terms of being that pipeline, as well as providing food access, safety through a food systems approach, etc. And so our ability within the cooperative extension system is really to transfer knowledge and help empower communities to take action and resolve their problems by becoming a catalyst to help community help themselves in finding whatever it is that they are trying to solve. Like much of the cooperative extension system, urban extension is in a unique position to be relevant locally, responsive statewide, and recognized nationally through our efforts. And so roughly 3 years ago at the Galaxy Conference in Pittsburgh, a group of very committed extension educators and administrators who've been working on this idea and the focus of urban for an awful long time came together and began to talk, plan, and implement a national urban extension network. And this was identified as a need long ago, and growing this initiative within a network of additional personnel at all levels within the cooperative extension service and system has become a growing focal point, as it is critical to build capacity within the NUEL, the National Urban Leaders Group, Extension Leaders Group, with program leaders, program faculty, extension educators, and staff at all levels. And so the sharing between state extension programs in this network is one of the most powerful characteristics that cooperative extension overall can represent and sort of embody, with programs, projects, initiatives, and funding opportunities, something that really brings the spirit alive within the NUEL network. And so you could ask the question as well, how do you go about, or how do you go from 0 to 60 in 3 years and form a national network within our existing system? And the answer is NUEL, the National Urban Extension Leaders Group that we're talking about today. It has laid the foundation for a national urban extension network. It's positioned itself in partnership within the system to provide leadership for urban extension across the country. And so with the help, the support, and recognition from ECOP, the Extension Committee on Organizational Planning, extension directors as well across the country, and a committed core of urban extension educators and administrators, we've creatively assembled a national framework this past summer in 2015 that Marie will talk about in a minute. NUEL as a network is dedicated to working with the Cooperative Extension System and with its leadership, programs, faculty, and personnel across the nation in building a strong voice not only for urban, but importantly, as I mentioned before, the interdependencies between urban, suburbia, and rural communities and people. So who is NUEL currently? It is an existing group of extension professionals that have joined together to advance the strategic importance and long-term value of urban extension activities, and we currently have active participation and representation from 23 states across the country. Our ambition as NUEL within this National Urban Extension Network is to collect and assess national impacts of urban extension activities, solicit funding for urban initiatives, provide network opportunities for staff, and synthesizing data to create a national agenda. And we've begun to lay the groundwork for a national network of extension professionals with much work to do by creating and promoting an outline framework or agenda for urban extension. This is the framework. We've formed action teams in core prioritized areas attached to urban work. We've developed a website to serve as a platform and to showcase urban extension activities and success stories. And importantly, we've begun to develop relationships at a number of levels inside the Cooperative Extension System and with external partners, moving the dial further with not only urban extension conversations and planning, etc., but with activities that will result and have resulted thus far in action. So let me have Marie tell you a little bit more about the structure of NUEL and the opportunities within. Take it away, Marie.
Great, thank you, Patrick. As Martha shared at the beginning of the webinar, I'm Marie Rumenap, and I'm with Michigan State University Extension. And I'm actually one of the members who was around that table for breakfast at the Galaxy Conference and has been involved in since the beginning with the National Urban Extension Leaders Network, or NUEL. And as Patrick shared with you, our purpose really is to advance the strategic importance and long-term value of urban extension and its related activities. But as you heard Patrick go through some of the things, or the list of things that NUEL is working on, one of the things that I hope you kind of noted was that there was no mention of specific extension programming around urban. So we're not really looking at urban extension from the programmatic level, but really more at the policy level, meaning we are focusing on extension sort of organizationally, operationally, and procedurally wise, so that we can help us as a national system be more effective in working with urban areas. Now, ultimately, that will impact the programming that we do there, but at this point in time, we really are focusing on that larger organizational perspective. So as Patrick mentioned, to begin to formalize this effort, last summer, the NUEL Steering Committee worked to develop a white paper outlining a framework for the urban extension. And this was done at the request of ECOP. And in the fall, ECOP approved the National Framework for Extension, which you see a picture of here on the slide. And it can be found on the website at the address that's at the bottom of the slide as well, if you're interested in looking at a copy. This framework document outlines the necessity for extension to increase its attention on serving urban and metropolitan audiences. And Patrick did a really good job at the beginning of this webinar and throughout his presentation on covering those factors that are outlined in the framework document. But then the National Framework document goes on to identify 4 areas that Extension needs to focus on for the future to be more effective. And they are positioning, programs, personnel, and partnerships. So in the framework, it outlines how Extension needs to work on positioning itself at the national, state, regional, and city levels. Then how Extension needs to provide programming that addresses the multitude of issues and priorities that occur in urban environments. Then how Extension needs to work on attracting, developing, retaining competent, talented individuals to work in urban areas. And then lastly, how Extension needs to collaborate to leverage the resources for collective impact in these areas. To ease with the tech issues today, we thought it'd be easier if just one of us handled the slide deck. So Patrick's doing that on behalf of me for this group. And so thank you, Patrick, for switching to my next slide for me. In the framework document, besides outlining the history and sort of what needs to be done, it also provides an operational procedures and some information about the organizational structure for NUEL. And the outline structure for NUEL calls for regional caucuses made up of 1 or more representatives from state extension systems. NUEL has organized the current participating member states and their representatives into these regional groups. Currently, there's better representation from some areas of the country than others, and NUEL has and will continue to work with ECOP to ensure better national representation, including working on representation from 1890 institutions. But the reality is that the caucuses are still very much under development at this point in time, and there are a focus of NUEL for this next year in terms of our national organizing efforts, and they'll probably remain a focus of our national organizing efforts probably into 2017 as we begin to operationalize these caucuses. The operational procedures also call for each of the regional caucuses to elect or select 3 representatives to serve on a 17-member NUEL steering committee. All the current caucuses have done this. So the NUEL steering committee includes 3 representatives from each of the Northeast, Southern, Western, and North Central states, and then 3 from the 1890 institutions. It also includes 1 member from ECOP, and then one member from NEPA, the National Institute for Food and Agriculture. We've had some vacancies on that group, but I'm pleased to share that as of yesterday during the NUEL Steering Committee, we actually now have all of the steering committee positions filled, so that's exciting for us. Each of the 3 state and 1890 representatives have a role. 1 member of the group leads the regional caucuses or provides leadership for those caucuses. The second member serves on the NUEL Executive Committee, which is the group that helps provide leadership for the steering committee and the overall organization. And then the 3rd member chairs one of the action teams. And the action teams are where the real work or action of NUEL is taking place. And I'll talk more about these in a minute or 2. So Patrick, if we can go to the next slide. But before I talk more about the action teams, I'd like to talk to you for a minute about how you can become involved. NUEL is looking to involve more extension staff from across the country in an initiative to promote and expand extension's work in urban and large metropolitan areas. And as Patrick shared earlier, NUEL was organized really as a grassroots organization, and we welcome any extension professional working in or responsible for extension professionals working in urban or metropolitan communities. And anyone that's interested and would like to support NUEL efforts at the policy level. So basically anyone that's interested is welcome to join NUEL. So how can you do that? You can do that actually today or any time you have a few minutes by simply emailing me or Patrick or the Western Center that's hosting the webinar today and letting us know that you'd like to join NUEL. If you do that, you will be placed on the NUEL listserv and begin to get information about NUEL meetings and activities. You'll also be placed on the appropriate regional caucus listserv. So as these groups begin to become more organized over the next few months, you'll also get information about getting involved at that level as well. You can also attend one of the semi-annual total membership meetings of NUEL. And we have one of those coming up in May in Columbus. And I'll talk a little bit more about that towards the end of the webinar. And we'll also give you some additional information on how to register for that meeting towards the end of the webinar. Then you can also get involved in one or more of the action teams. And our action teams revolve around partnerships, strategic alignment in urban policy, communications, research, and professional development. And we'd love to have any of you that are interested in getting involved with one or more of these action teams do that by just contacting either myself or the chair that's listed here. So the partnership, to kind of give you an idea of where you might like to get connected, actually, Patrick, if I could have you go back maybe one slide. Yeah, there we go. So to give you a little bit of an idea of where you might like to get connected and what you might like to work on, I'm going to give just a brief overview of what these action teams do. The first one is the Partnership Action Team, and it's chaired by Catherine Williams from North Carolina Cooperative Extension. And this group is focused on developing a database of NUEL membership, operationalizing the regional caucuses, and identifying and building relationships with national partner organizations. Then the Strategic Alignment and Urban Policy Action Team is currently chaired by DeShanna York, and she's from the University of Alaska Fairbanks Cooperative Extension. And this group is focusing on developing a new member support system to engage existing and new NUEL members. They're also leveraging existing tools such as e-extension and exploring funding opportunities for urban extension. Then the third committee, which is communications, is chaired by Chris Obrepta from Rutgers Cooperative Extension. And this group is focusing on the development of a website, brochures, PowerPoint presentations, and other communication tools for NUEL. If I could have the next slide, please. The Research Action Team is chaired by Brad Gerlich from Washington State University Extension, and Brad's also the director of the Western Center for Metropolitan Extension and Research, which is hosting our webinar today. And this group is focused on promoting urban extension research and on identifying a network of researchers that can be called upon to address urban issues as they arise. And then our last action team is professional development, and it's chaired by Julie Fox from the Ohio State University Cooperative Extension. And this group is focused on enhancing the professional growth of urban extension employees. And then I am the NUEL Executive Committee Liaison for the action teams. So as I said, if any of these sound like an area that you'd like to work, please just drop me or their chair an email and indicate your interest, and we'll put you on the listserv and we'll get you involved in the activities of these teams. So I hope to see some emails from people. Patrick, if I could have the next slide, please. Then, as I mentioned earlier, you can also just come to the next NUEL Total Membership meeting. That's how a lot of people who are involved now have gotten involved. And the next semi-annual NUEL total meeting is coming up here on May 23rd to 26th in Columbus, Ohio. We have a pre-meeting on May 23rd and the total membership meeting on the 24th and 25th. And then there's a follow-up tour on the morning of the 26th. And Julie Fox from Ohio State and the NUEL Steering Committee have worked really hard to put a good agenda together for this meeting. And to see the meeting agenda and to register, you can go to the web link that you see here on the website, or excuse me, in the slide set. There's still time to do this, and there's still time to make all your plans to join the group in Columbus here in about a month. Then, if I could have the next slide, Patrick, thank you. Lastly, if you just want to learn more about NUEL, you can visit our website, and it's NUEL Action, or NUELACTION.org, NUELaction.org. And it's been created to serve as a platform for sharing information across our national urban extension network. And the website is already being populated with urban extension success stories from across the nation. You can find the operating procedures, a list of the members, and a whole lot more information about NUEL on this website. So to kind of sum up NUEL, if you work in the city or metropolitan area and you have responsibility for administration or programming in that urban area or in an urban area, and you're interested in learning more about urban extension and collaborating with like-minded and interested extension staff from across the country, then NUEL might be the right place for you. If you're interested in helping extension move urban efforts forward in cities and metropolitan areas across this country, please consider emailing me or Patrick or the Western Center, coming to the meeting here in Columbus in another month, or visiting our website at NUELaction.org to learn more and to get involved. So with that, we'd like to open it up to any questions that people might have about NUEL or getting involved or anything that we've talked about today.
Thanks, Marie and Patrick. And I ask any of you out there who are interested in asking a question, please do type that into the chat pod. I have a question here from someone. You spoke about, Patrick, you spoke about the interdependencies between rural, suburban, and urban communities. So how can urban support rural and rural support urban?
Sure. Yeah, you know, one of the things coming out of Oregon that I think is really interesting, and part of it's based on our geography and sort of, you know, the landscape thereof, and being in the West, which I completely realize is different than, you know, other parts of the U.S. as far as regional differences and whatnot. But one of the things that we really pride ourselves in is kind of that rural-urban connection, and I think there's no better example out there in part than kind of where does our food come from and the agriculture and whatnot. And so for those of you that know a little bit about Portland, it really is a foodie city, and so there is a lot of connectivity with small farmers and kind of the agricultural thereof of some of the rural areas, and even in some of the more metropolitan counties and urban areas of the state in Oregon, and albeit that is not a New Jersey or a New York City per se, there are small pockets of you know, small farms and open space, and a lot of it has to do with land use and some of the policies that were invoked as Oregon began to grow. And, you know, of course the West is still growing of sorts, you know, type of thing. But a lot of that too is really based on kind of just the socialization thereof and kind of the exposure and kind of the relationships. And in the Portland metro area, we do a rural-urban exchange with 4-H youth, and it's incredibly fascinating to see the young people from the city go out to the ranches and learn how to brand, and they're riding a four-wheeler for the first time, and those rural kids are coming into a metropolitan area and they're learning about how to ride a light rail, or they're going to the mall for some of the first times, or they may be a bit intimidated in the beginning with some of the public safety issues that they may hear about from afar and that type of thing. But I also too think some of this piece is relational in the sense with our urban legislators. In a variety of places around the country, of course, in these urban environments, the preponderance of urban legislators sit part and parcel to urban, and so they oftentimes are yearning to be able to figure out ways and means to support rural, or perhaps, in some cases that's where the pressures come from. And so that connectivity, I think, is really, really important. And it starts with education, frankly, and really just knowing that we're in this together to help find salve, and that one group isn't necessarily trying to do the almighty takeover, if you will, of resources. And I think within our cooperative extension system, that's very key to some of our success in the future, is where do some of those resources go and how do we help each other.
And Martha, if I could, I'd like to add, Michigan used to have a director, and I don't think this is unique thing that he used to say, because I've heard others say it too, but he often used to say, to save our farms, we have to save our cities, because the issues that we have in cities don't stop at their borders, and the issues that we have on farms and rural communities don't stop, at their borders either. They cross county and jurisdictional lines, and so we need to work together on those issues that affect both to benefit the other.
Great, thank you. We have another question that's come in. I work in Montana, and our largest city is 100,000 people. How do we define urban, and what resources might be available for our small cities, so that would be under 40,000, that are growing at up to 5% per year?
I think that's yeah. You want to take it, Patrick, or you want me to?
Well, what I would say is, each state really, and it depends on, what indicators you're looking at and so on. I mean, oftentimes, a city is defined by, 50,000 and above, what constitutes a metropolitan area and so on. But I think this is it's a great question, because it's something that kind of really hits on how you really have to make and shape what urban is in these particular locations. And Montana is a great example, because there isn't necessarily a huge metropolitan area, and yet they're faced with kind of a lot of things that other places that are up and growing, and you have resource extraction taking place in places like that as well. But the under 40,000 or 50,000, and as they experience growth and what that looks and feels like. And so it's really based on kind of the collective, the leadership, whoever's making decisions, and sort of saying, okay, this is where we're going to push resources. But what I would say, as well as that kind of conversation is taking shape, very important, very important to define, but also very important to sort of put in place kind of a strategy or a plan, because the marvel is that you can be part of that growth as those city places and those kind of up and coming communities kind of take off. And extension, frankly, urban, it can be part and parcel to that. Whereas in a lot of these cities that have been around for a very, very long period of time, we are trying to catch up, and we're trying to be a player in that environment, which oftentimes, as I mentioned earlier, is challenging just because you have a number of different partners and entities and sometimes competitors that are also in that field. So Montana, Wyoming, different places like this that are kind of maybe perhaps considered small. There's great opportunities to engage in NUEL and also the Western Center for certain.
Yeah, I would just echo what Patrick has said. That even though some might consider a city of 100,000 people not really all that large, because of the growth that you're experiencing, I think that cities and places like the one you're describing in Montana really do have some of the same issues that other urban areas have. And as Patrick described, not all urban areas have the same issues in terms of maybe what the causes, maybe is a better way to say it, than really the same issues. Cities have population issues. Some is decline, some is growth. There's sprawl. There's sort of shrinking of cities. And so I think places need to define urban for themselves and look at those issues and align where they really can align, and that we have opportunities to learn from each other and engage. And so I definitely think there's opportunities for smaller places to learn from larger areas and vice versa.
So we have just a little bit more time, and I'd like to squeeze in this one last question if we can. Can you talk a little about how NUEL hopes to expand resources to urban extension by connecting to other federal agencies and by working with others such as NACO and LUC?
You want to go after that, Marie, initially?
Sure. We've had one of our action teams talking about potential strategic alignments with some of the groups that you've mentioned, like NACO and LUC, which is the large urban caucus, and looking at where extension's mission, and in particular our focus on urban, aligns with them, so that we can begin to build those partnerships. We realize that we have a defined set of resources in the system, and we need to expand that set as we have when we worked in other areas and other specific focus topics, and urban is similar to that. And so at this point, NUEL has talked about it, and we began to put the list together, and we began to make some preliminary connections in some limited places, but that's definitely on the horizon to do, thinking that there are organizations or entities outside of USDA and NEPA where funding could be accessed because of those shared missions. So it's on the, best thing I can say is it's on the agenda, and we're working towards that, but we're new, and we're still putting a lot of organizational pieces in place. I wish I could share some success stories with you other than just it's on the agenda to do. So Patrick, would you add anything to that?
Yeah, I would just quickly add that by working within the existing systems in cooperative extension, first and foremost working with and being supported by ECOP, as well as knowing that our number one partner in the system is NEPA and USDA and whatnot, is broadening out and building those relationships, with other federal agencies, whether it's, HUD, whether it's EPA, whether those kind of turn back and become kind of more regional focused conversations and relationships. But certainly looking outward to kind of build a platform with other more diverse funding models, particularly those seem to meet kind of the greater need in an urban environment. We have folks that have mind mapped, kind of the NACO structure and also LUC, that large urban county caucus, and what we're really trying to do is begin to build those relationships and demonstrate to NACO, which, like many organizations, is interested in outside assistance and help, but demonstrating to them that we have the expertise and that we can be flexible, nimble, and we can kind of move on the dime, if you will, in an urban environment to try to address some of the things that they also too are working on. And so, hopefully it will be a mutual kind of relationship and partnership build, certainly in formation now, but it is something that ECOP, for instance, is very interested in wanting us to kind of develop and cultivate. So, we're on it, and we're going to be moving forward with some of those conversations in the future.
Patrick, Marie, thank you. And thank you all for participating in the webinar today, which was offered at no charge through the support of contributing members to the Western Center for Metropolitan Extension and Research. This webinar has been recorded and will be available next week on the Western Center website, metroextension.wsu.edu. The Center holds monthly webinars on the last Thursday of the month from noon to 1 p.m. Pacific Time. However, next month there will be no webinar, so that anyone interested can attend NUEL's biannual meeting in Columbus, Ohio. I'll be there, and I hope you'll consider coming too. For information about the meeting, go to the NUEL website at nuelaction.org. We'll return again on June 23rd for Competency in the City, when Julie Fox from The Ohio State University will explore the knowledge, skills, and abilities that extension professionals need to serve our metropolitan communities. Go to the WCMER website, metroextension.wsu.edu, to register for the webinar and to join our mailing list. Once you exit this webinar, we will launch a brief survey so we can find out what you thought of the webinar today. So please take a moment to fill it out and make sure to tell us what you want to learn about in future webinars. That concludes our webinar for April 2016. On behalf of the Western Center for Metropolitan Extension and Research and our presenters, Patrick Proden and Marie Rumenap, I thank you all for joining us. We'll be with you again in June. Have a wonderful afternoon.